بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم فقد نوينا التعلم وتعليم وتذكر وتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة نبيه والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على خير وكل ما نواه مشايخنا ابتغاء وجه الله وثوابه وقربه. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا يا كريم. Alhamdulillah, in our look at the wisdoms and aphorisms of Imam Abdullah bin Ali al-Haddad, one of the great saints and sages and scholars of Islam from the city of Tarim, we have been looking at some of the wisdoms that he teaches us, and today we'll be looking at the next three, starting with number 19, where Imam al-Haddad alayhi ridwanullahi ta'ala says, "Al-ma'unatu fi kitmani sirri aqallu min al-ma'unati fi takhawwufi ifsha'ihi mimman tutli'uhu alayh." Right, to translate, he says, radiyallahu anhu, the burden of concealing a secret is less than the burden of the fear of spreading it to others. The burden of concealing a secret is less than the burden of the fear of spreading it to others. Now we just want to contextualize what Imam al-Haddad alayhi rahmatullahi ta'ala is mentioning here about secrets. Right? So this idea of secrets that is intended in this meaning specifically, you'll hear the word sir or asrar mentioned a lot, especially in the books of spirituality. But what Imam al-Haddad specifically is talking about here is that if someone is seeking to pursue something in the future, or they have a certain goal that they're trying to attain in the future, and there's something, they have plans, for instance, future plans that they're going to do, and they are of, especially those that are of importance, then it is praiseworthy and sought after in the sacred law that one keeps those things to themselves, that one keeps them as if they're secrets, right? And only those who need to know should know, right? So talking about things that one wants to do in the future, that are of great importance, the things that someone has plans to do, right? To those who don't need to know, right, or are not involved, who don't need to be involved, right? That it is disliked to do that. And we're not talking about disliked in a legal sense, but it is, right, it is not ideal to do so. Right? In the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as is mentioned in the hadith of Imam al-Tabarani, he said, "Ista'inu ala injahi hawaijikum bil kitman." فَإِنَّ كُلَّ ذِي نِعْمَةٍ مَحْسُودٍ. He said that seek assistance in the success of your needs by keeping them a secret, right? I mean, so that if you have future plans that you're really in need of coming into fruition, right, then take assistance by keeping it secret, because that will help you into succeeding in those plans. And the Prophet closes by saying, فَإِنَّ كُلَّ ذِي نِعْمَةٍ مَحْسُودٍ, because everyone who has blessings, right, is envied. Right? For everyone who has blessings is envied. Right? So if you have intentions of traveling to study, or you have intentions to perform the Hajj, or you have intentions on getting married, or you have intentions on, for instance, whatever it may be, especially if it's a religious goal, right, then only those who need to know, right, about your future plans should know. It's not that you should post on your feed, or your social media feed, right, to everyone that, oh, I want to memorize the Quran, right, I intend to memorize the Quran, or I intend to go to Tarim to study, or I intend to do this or that, right, because people are jealous, people become jealous. Right? And jealousy, even though it is a blameworthy trait of the heart, right, the human nature inclines toward it, to being, right, to feeling upset, right, or to feeling badly about the successes of others. Right? It is one of the base human desires, right? The human nature, right, is is selfish. So when other people have successes, right, the base nature of the human being, right, is offended by that or insulted by that, or they feel wrong about it, and that's the idea of jealousy, that they wish that that blessing does not come to you. Right, so because of the jealousy of onlookers, right, one keeps secret their future goals and plans, especially those of great importance, and especially those of a religious nature, right, so as to protect themselves, right, from the envy of others. Right, now this does not go against the verse of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, and as for the blessing of your Lord, then express it, right, then tell about it, then inform others about it. Right, Allah is telling us to express, right, to talk about the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us. Right, this wisdom does not go against that, because that verse is in regards to something after you have acquired the blessing. Right, so your future plans, right, are not have not come to fruition yet. They have not happened yet. When they happen and you achieve your goal and your plans come out successfully, then you can tell people, right, out of a sense of gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not out of showing off. Right, but until they happen, then it is best, right, it is praiseworthy in the sacred in the Sharia to keep it to yourself. Right, so this is one of the aspects of which this wisdom applies to, right, that the burden of concealing a secret, right, so if a person is going to do that, they're going to hide, they're going to keep to themselves their future objectives and plans, it's hard to do it. It's very difficult to do, right? Because generally people like to share their goals and to share their happinesses and to share their aims and objectives with others, especially those close to them, right? So the human nature intends to, and one has to be very careful, because one could be expressing those things out of a sense of arrogance or pride, right? Right, so to keep it secret is best for both situations, so that the onlooker, the one who hears about it, does not become jealous, and also so that the one who is expressing it, right, does not arrogate to themselves, right, something that they don't actually deserve. Right, so Imam al-Haddad says the burden of concealing a secret is less than the burden of fear of spreading it to others. Right, so keeping it to yourself may be difficult, but it's even worse once you let it slip. You can't get it back, and the regret that you will feel, right, because of that, right, is much worse of a burden, right, than the burden of keeping it into yourself. Tamam. Right, and this is, right, now secondly, this also applies to the secrets others tell you, to the secrets that others tell you. Because keeping a secret is part of is of the obligations of Islam, and it falls under the umbrella of al-amana, right, trust. Right, that someone who who tells you a secret is essentially trusting you not to spread it. Right, so, and the Prophet said, "La imana liman la amanata lah." Right, there is no faith for the one who has no trust. Right, meaning that if a person really had faith, they would be trustworthy. So a person who's untrustworthy, it's a sign that their faith is deficient. Also, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-majalis bil-amana," right, that gatherings are on the basis of trust. Right, so whatever you talk about in a private gathering, right, is not meant to be spread. Right, it is trusted that you will not spread those things publicly. Also, the Prophet said, "Al-mustasharu mu'taman," that the one whose advice is taken, right, is trusted. Right? So if you do go to somebody and say, "Okay, I want to go to so and so country to study Islam," and your only reason you're telling them is to seek advice from them, so there's a need in it, right? Right? Then that person is required not to tell anybody, right, except without your permission. Or if you start to publicize it, then they no longer are obliged to keep it a secret, because you yourself are not keeping it a secret. But until then, right, they are trusted to keep that thing a secret. Imam al-Haddad, he mentions that if somebody comes to you and tells you something in a quiet voice and then looks around, right, to see if other people are there, that even though they didn't tell you to keep it a secret, you have to keep it a secret, because Even though the tongue did not say, this is a secret, don't tell anyone, the circumstances of which they told you imply that anyway. Right? Why are they making sure that nobody's listening? Why are they speaking in a low voice? Why are they whispering to you? Right? It is as if they're saying to you, don't spread this to anyone, don't tell anyone. Right? And there are some exceptions. If somebody's going to harm themselves or harm other people, right? Then you might be obliged to tell those who can help, right? And especially like, right. So this applies, like for instance, counselors, right? There's a secrecy between the patient-client privilege, right? But if the client says they're going to kill themselves or they're going to harm somebody else, or this, then the counselor is obliged to tell, right, legal authority or somebody who can help to them. Now, there's two really beautiful examples of this idea of keeping secrets of other people, right, in the seerah, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he had certain things that he kept to himself, right? And right, so one great example is that at the time of the Prophet ﷺ's passing, when he was in his deathbed, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he brought Sayyidah Aisha close to him. Now, all of the wives were present. All of the women were present, and he called Sayyidah Fatima, his daughter, close to him, and he whispered to her something, right? And she started to cry. Right? Then he brought her closer again, and he whispered to her a second thing, and she started to laugh. Right? After that, after the Prophet ﷺ passed, right, and some time had gone by, Sayyidah Aisha, who was there, she asked Sayyidah Fatima about it. Right? That what did the Prophet tell you at first that made you cry, and then what did he tell you secondly that made you laugh? So at first she she swore that she would not tell anyone, but then when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, right, then she told Sayyidah Aisha that first he brought me close, and he told me, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that every year Jibril comes to me and goes over the Quran with me, right, one time. But this year he came to me and he went over it with me twice. And I see that as a sign that my time has come, meaning the time of my passing has come. Right, so she started to cry. Right, she started to cry because of the news that he's going to pass away, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right, and then he brought her closer, right, and he told her that she would be the first of his family to join him, right, and that she would be the foremost of all women of paradise. Right, so because of that glad tidings, both that she would be able to be with him, and she passed away 6 months after that. Sadaqa Rasulullah, right, the Prophet was exactly right. Right, and that she would be the leader of the people, the women of paradise. Right, she started to laugh, but you can see that she was adamant that she would not tell anybody, and only after the passing of the Prophet ﷺ did she tell. This also happened that Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, he had his daughter's name was Hafsa. Now Hafsa was married to one of the Sahabi. His name was Khunais bin Hudhafa as-Sahmi. Now Khunais, he was martyred in the Battle of Badr. He was killed in the Battle of Badr as a martyr. Right, so Hafsa is without a husband now. Right, so Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab, Ibn al-Khattab, he went to Uthman ibn Affan, and he proposed that Uthman marry his daughter, Hafsa, right, the widow. Right, so Uthman said, give me some time to think about it, and then he came back shortly after and said that I don't think that I'm inclined to marrying at all at this time. Right, so Sayyidina Umar, he went to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radallahu anhu, and he proposed to him to marry his daughter. And Sayyidina Umar, he said, give me some time to think about it. Right, and days passed, and Sayyidina Abu Bakr never came back to Umar. Right, so Umar, he kind of felt insulted by that, right, that he didn't come back and give him an answer. Right, but then a short time after that, the Prophet ﷺ actually proposed to Umar for the hand of his daughter Hafsa, right, and then Umar accepted, and she was married to the Prophet ﷺ. And then Abu Bakr as-Siddiq came to Umar and said that perhaps you were very insulted by me not coming back and replying to your proposal. And Umar said, yes, I was actually. And Abu Bakr said that the only reason I didn't reply to you is because I knew the Prophet ﷺ had already mentioned marrying Hafsa, or the idea of marrying Hafsa, and had he changed his mind, I would have accepted your proposal. So he was waiting for that. Right? But the fact that he knew already, when Umar came to him, he already knew that the Prophet had the idea of marrying Hafsa. Right? But that was a secret that nobody knew, that he kept to himself, even in the situation where Umar felt insulted. Right? To that extent. Right? He was adamant to not spread the secret of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? And there are other examples as well. And lastly, this wisdom also applies, right, to what are considered subtle realities, right? Also translated as secrets, but subtle realities is probably closer to the meaning. The same word in Arabic though, sir, asrar, that there are certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unveils to His most elite and pious slaves, because of the purity of their hearts, that they removed from their hearts all of the blameworthy qualities like arrogance and self-conceit and ostentation and all of these things. And because they purified their hearts, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unveils to them certain realities that other people whose hearts aren't ready for it cannot perceive, or not privy to, or do not have who are not blessed to know. Right? So these things are spiritual states, are things that Allah unveils to the people's hearts, right? That they are not supposed to tell everyone. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he commanded us to speak to people according to their level of understanding. To speak to people according to their level of understanding. Right? So these high-level spiritual realities that are unveiled to these elite servants of Allah whose hearts are completely purified from anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that their spiritual states, right, those who are not of their state won't really understand it. Right? So for that reason, they are trusted that they do not spread they do not talk freely about those realities to just anyone. Right? Because something similar happened in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, where one of the companions was speaking to people, right, these subtle realities that they weren't ready to understand, that they were not ready to hear. So the Prophet ﷺ, he came and he said, Ya Mu'adh, fattanun ant, O Mu'adh, are you causing fitna? Are you causing fitna? Right? أَتُرِيدُ أَن يُكَذَّبَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. Do you want that Allah and His Messenger be denied or rejected? Right? Because if somebody hears something that they're not ready to hear, they might not believe it. They may not accept it the way that they should. Right? So for that reason, it is not allowed to talk about these high-level meanings. And generally, the scholars, right, who are of those states, they would only talk about their states in poetry. Right? Their high levels of love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the realities of what Allah unveils to them. Right? So to some extent, right, the miracles of the saints and the sages are known. Right? We believe that there are such things as non-prophetic miracles, that miracles that happen at the hands of people who are not prophets, but they are righteous servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whose hearts are purified. We believe this fully because it's in the Quran. Right? The people of the cave were not prophets. They slept for 309 years. That's not normal. That's a miracle. Right? The mother of Isa alayhi salam, according to the majority opinion, that she is not a prophet. Right? But still she had food and all of these different foods and fruits and everything from places from far off lands. Right? And Zakaria alayhi salam entered and said, how did you get this food? She says, it's from Allah. Right, so that's a miracle that happened to a person who's not a prophet. Right? We see in the lives of the Sahaba many different examples of this. Right? Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, he's standing on the mimbar in the masjid in Medina, and he's giving the Jum'ah khutbah. Right? but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unveils to him that the army that he sent to Iraq was about to be attacked from behind them from the mountains. Right? So during the khutbah, Sayyidina Umar yelled out, Ya Sariya, he called to the general of that army, O Sariya, look at the mountain, look at the mountain. A few days later, when that army came back, right, they said to Umar, we heard you. Right? Allah made your voice reach us, that we heard you. So that's a miracle. Somebody calling from Medina to Iraq, right, just by voice with no phone or anything, that's a miracle. Right? And Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab is not a prophet. Right? And there's many examples of this. Right? But there are some miracles like that are so profound that many people, right, if you were to say it in a public gathering, it would be problematic because not a lot of people can would truly understand that, even though there's no issue with it, right? Because Allah is able to do all things, and if He wants to do something for His beloved slave, right, then it is within the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do that, regardless of how profound it is to them. Right? So the Sahaba, they understood this, that there are certain things that people are not ready for. So Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radhiallahu anhu, he says, حفظت من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعائني من العلم وعائن, that I have memorized from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam two vessels, right? As for one of them, then I have spread it amongst you, meaning the knowledge of the injunctions of the Islam, the rules and regulations of Islam. I have spread that amongst you. I've taught you all, right? And as for the other, that had I spread it to you, then you would have killed me. Literally, the Arabic means you would have cut my throat, right? You would have killed me. Now the scholars, they mentioned that the first vessel that he spread to everyone is the knowledge of the sacred law. What are the rules? Right? What are the regulations? What is halal? What is haram? Right? What is good character? What is righteousness? What is taqwa? All of these things that he spread, he taught them. Right? But as for the second, right, there are certain knowledge that the Prophet told him, but he did not spread them to people because the people were not ready. The scholars, they discuss what is this second type of knowledge, right? Some said that Abu Hurairah was taught some of the tribulations that will happen in the future, right? So he would not express it clearly because some of the tribulations had to do with some of the leaders of the time, right? Some of the corrupt leaders. So if he were to express it fully, like with their names and everything, then they would have him killed. Right? The unjust rulers, right? And sometimes he wouldn't say it, he wouldn't express it explicitly. He would just he would make equivocations, right? He would imply. So he says he would say, like for instance, I seek refuge in Allah from 60 and children becoming leaders. Right? So nobody really understood what that meant, right? Because say that Abu Hurairah, he passed away in the 59th year after the Hijrah, right? But what happened on the 60th year, Yazid bin Muawiyah became the Khalifa. Yazid bin Muawiyah was a young person, right? And because of his caliphate, a lot of tribulations and a lot of bad things happened, right? So if Abu Hurairah had mentioned that, right, at the time of Yazid, then he may have been harmed. Right? So that's one of the meanings. But some others, they mention that this knowledge relates to these hidden realities that Allah unveils to His righteous servants that are only for those who have purified their hearts and those who fully know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Tamam. Right, which not everyone would be ready for, right? Except for those whose hearts have been illuminated by striving and struggling against the nafs. Right, tamam. Right, tamam. Right, so, but to keep in those secrets is difficult, but it's even worse, right, to spread it, right? Because the regret of saying something, you can never take it back. That's a harder burden to bear. Next, Imam al-Haddad, he says, أدل دليل على كمال عقل الرجل ثناؤه على إقرانه. We'll take this paragraph at a time. Right? The greatest proof of a person's intellect is their praise of their peers. Right? It's for them to praise their peers. Right? And what does that mean? Right? That if you want to look and see the intellect of a person, right, look at how they deal with those who are on the same level with them or lower. Right? Because everybody praises those who are above them. Everybody's going to praise their teachers, everybody's going to praise their shaykh, their spiritual guide, their mentor, right? Everyone's going to praise those who are above them, right? But very few are those who praise their equals, their peers, right? Because generally a peer is somebody you're competing with, right? Those who are on your classmates or your, right? And those are your colleagues. You're on the same level of them, so you're competing for higher levels, right? So the one who praises them, right, that's a sign of their intellect, right? Because why? Because even though it's very subtle, right, somebody who praises their own teacher, right, has to be very careful of their intention, right? But so to go around saying that I learned from my teacher so and so, that my teacher so and so said this, right? They're praising that teacher, right, by quoting from that teacher and by mentioning that teacher, but they're also praising themselves inadvertently, right? They are also praising themselves because why? My teacher, right? That person's so pious, and guess what? I'm his student, right? That is problematic, right? So, right, because everyone praises the teachers, and some people do it, right, out of arrogance, and some people do it just to show off, right? So true intellect would be, right, to praise, to give everyone their rights. So if you're the one you're competing with, right, has a virtue, express it, right? Just because they're in competition with you doesn't mean that you can't mention their virtues, right? And that also applies to those below you, those who are inferior in status, like the child to a parent, or one's employees, right, to the boss. Right? If someone beneath you has a virtue, express it. If someone, right, in your same level has a virtue, express it. And that's intellect, because it is to know that everyone has a virtue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them, right? And that virtue, right, deserves to be mentioned. Right? He says وَأَدَلُّ دَلِيلٍ عَلَى تَوَاضُعِهِ رِضَاهُ بِالتَّخِيرِ فِي مَوْطِنٍ يَسْتَحِقُّ فِيهِ التَّقْدِيمِ. The greatest proof of one's humility is their contentment in being put back in a place where he deserves to be put forward. Right? Taqdeem and ta'khir usually applies to a gathering, because in gatherings, those who have a higher status and those who are of higher rank and higher notability, they are put in the front of the gathering. They're giving precedence in the gathering. And those who are, like for instance, usually the children are in the back, right? Usually those who are young or the students are put in the back of the gathering, right? And this applies to the gathering setting, right? So a true sign, the greatest proof of somebody's humility is that they enter a gathering and their status dictates that they should be in the front, but they're content with being in the back, right? They're content with being in the back. Tamam. Right? And this goes back to humility, because humility is, as Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, he says that humility is not in shrugging the shoulders and lowering the head, right? That true humility is an action of the heart. True humility is to not see yourself as better than anyone, rather that you look at everyone and you see them as better than you. That is true humility. So it's not about how you carry yourself. Right? It's very possible that a person walks with their head down, shrugged shoulders, right? And they say that I'm nothing, but in reality they think they're greater than everyone. And it's very possible that somebody walks with their head held high in full dignity and walks around like a king, and inwardly they realize, they feel that they are nothing compared to everyone around them. Right? And that's true humility. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that إِنَّ اللَّهَ أَوْحَى إِلَيَّ أَن تَوَاضَعُوا, that Allah revealed to me the command of be humble, right? So that no one can boast over another. Right? And the Prophet said that man tawada'a lillahi rafa'ahu Allah. Whoever is humble for the sake of Allah, Allah will raise their ranks. Right? So those who we speak about, like Imam al-Haddad and all of these great righteous servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and scholars, that even though we speak of them very highly, right, what they think of themselves, right, is pure humility. That they feel that they are indebted to their students, even though they're the teacher. They feel that they're indebted to others, that and they don't see themselves as having any virtue, right, because all of their virtues they ascribe it to be a blessing from Allah, in which them having no hand in doing it. Right? So they ascribe all the blessings of Allah to Allah, and they take no credit for themselves. They only take credit for their faults. Right? So they see themselves as nothing. And because of that, Allah raises their status, and we continue to read their books even hundreds of years after they have passed away. Radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'een. Right? And then lastly, he says that the greatest proof of one's sincerity is their lack of care of upsetting the creation for the sake of the real of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That if someone is truly sincere in their worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they will obey Allah even if it displeases people. They will obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? They will fulfill the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even if it displeases people. Right? So a person needs to pray. Right? A person is fasting. A person is doing this or that. Right? And they need to pray. Right? They can pray anywhere. They can get out of the car, pray in the parking lot, pray in any public space, pray in the park, right? But there's people around, right? If they're truly praying for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they won't worry about whether people approve or people dislike. Obviously, they're not going to pray on private land. They're not going to make a show of it so that they're not going to do it in a very unwise way. But essentially, Allah's command comes first. Everyone else is second. Right? And this is an echoing of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. There is no obedience to creation in the disobedience of the Creator. Tamam. And then to close, apologies. Right? The last one, we won't go into too much detail because we've talked about this today in a few different lessons. And Imam al-Haddad says, الدنيا شيئان لا ثالث لهما. Right? The world is two things, there is no third to them. أحدهما حب المال والآخر حب الجاه. The first of them is love of wealth, the other is love of status. So the world is two things. It's made out of two things. Right? And the dunya is a bad connotation. The dunya is everything that distracts you from the obedience of Allah. So everything that is prohibited by Allah and everything that distracts you from Allah is considered dunya. Right? It is considered dunya. So that dunya is made up of two things. Either love of wealth or love of status. All of it boils down to these two things. Either love of wealth or love of status. Right? Tamam. Right? And along with love of wealth is love of what wealth can get. Love of what wealth can buy, which is the physical appetites and lusts of the body. The pleasures and enjoyments, physical pleasures and enjoyments that are haram. Right? So with that being said, Imam al-Haddad breaks people down into 4 levels. Sorry? Right? Apologies. Right? He says, فَمَنْ زَهِدَ فِي الْمَالِ وَالْجَاهِ فَهُوَ الصِّدِّيقُ. So whoever abstains from wealth and status, then they are a true servant. They are a true servant. Now, what he means by abstaining here is not abandoning a job, leaving your job. Right? It doesn't mean that. Right? What he means by abstaining here is that leaving out anything that has to do with wealth and status that is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So earning money in a haram way, spending money in a haram way, right? Having a status, right? And being arrogant about that status, right? Or loving people to praise you. Right? Not just having a status, because someone can have a status, right? But they are not but their heart is not there, they're not in love with their status. Right? They're not seeking a higher status, but they're just put there. Like, for instance, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was made the Khalifa. He was appointed as the Khalifa. He didn't seek it out. Sayyidina Umar said that anyone who seeks leadership, we never make them the leader. Right? So this idea of campaigning and this, it's very strange to the Islamic concept. Right? So those who abstain from that which is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding wealth and status, then they are a true servant of Allah. Right? Because they combined both. Right? They left both aspects of the dunya. They have completely left the dunya. Right? The second, he says, وَمَنْ زَهِدَ فِي الْمَالِ دُونَ الْجَاهِ فَهُ مُرَاء. Whoever abstains regarding wealth but not status, then they're showing off. Right? Meaning that their only goal in this life is that their main pursuit is the pursuit of status, the pursuit of praise, the pursuit of rank in the eyes of people. And the Prophet ﷺ, he warned against this greatly, especially those who use the religion to achieve that status. Right? Meaning that they only do religious things in order to achieve a status amongst people. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said that من طلب العلم ليماري به السفهاء وليجادل به العلماء أو ليصرف به وجوه الناس إليه أدخله الله النار. That whoever seeks knowledge so that they can prove wrong the foolish people and argue with the scholars and turn the attention of people toward them, then Allah will put them in the hellfire. Right? So they're seeking knowledge so that the peoples can point to them and say, oh, that's Shaykh so-and-so, that's so-and-so. Right? To turn the attention of people toward them. Right? That is a seeking of status. And it's even more heinous if the religion is used to do it. Right? Right? So the person who doesn't really care about wealth, but they care about status, they're showing off, meaning they're seeking other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And then he says, وَمَنْ زَهِدَ فِي الْجَاهِ وَأَحَبَّ الْمَالِ فَهُوَ لَئِيمٌ. Whoever abstains regarding status and loves wealth, sorry, there's a mistake, right? But loves wealth, they are lowly people. Right? They are lowly. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he also warned about this. He says, in one narration, he says, "Ta'isa abdul dinar wa dirham." That cursed is the one who is a slave to gold and silver. Meaning that their only goal in this world is money. Right? And we talked about this in Surah Al-Humazah. Right? That those who just hoard their money and count it, thinking that it's going to make them live forever. Right? So the person who's only pursuing money, they don't care about status, they just want money. Right? Then they're a lowly person. A lowly person. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, هَلَكَ الْمُكْثِرُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ قَالَ فِي عِبَادِ اللَّهِ هَكَذَا وَهَكَذَا وَقَلِيلٌ مَّهُمْ. The Prophet said that those who are in abundance of wealth are destroyed, except for those who say that for these slaves of Allah is this amount, and for these slaves of Allah is for this amount. Right? And they are few, and those types of people are few, he says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning that those who use their wealth as a means to draw nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? They don't earn their wealth in haram, they don't spend their wealth in haram, they spend their wealth only in that which is obligatory and that which is permissible, and they seek by means of that the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rewards in the hereafter. And then lastly, Imam al-Haddad closes by saying, وَمَنْ أَحَبَّ الْمَالَ وَالْجَاهَ فَكَانَ أَصْغَرُ عُقُوبَتِهِ حِرْمَانَهُمَا. And whoever loves wealth and status, then the least of their punishment is that they will be deprived of them both. They will be deprived of them both. Right? So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our sole objective in this world, right, His pleasure, gaining His pleasure subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to make us of the people of complete tawheed, of complete, pure, absolute monotheism, right, in every objective and every goal and every pursuit, so that nothing, that we strive toward nothing except that we're seeking in it the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Not seeking any worldly gains, not seeking status from people, not seeking money, not seeking anything except for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst His righteous servants. So to close, in summary, number 19, we talked about concealing your future plans is praiseworthy, although difficult. Likewise, concealing the secrets of your fellow Muslim, right, is the same, right, and may even be obligatory to do so. Right, number 20, we talked about, right, proof of faith. So praising your peers is hard on the ego and a sign of intellect, and belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's discretion to give His favor to whom He wishes, right, is, right, a sign of intellect. Again, we also talked about that one's humility is in them not having, not thinking that they deserve to be honored. Right? And then lastly, seeking wealth and status is from the base desires. Seeking Allah Most High, right? Seek Allah Most High, whose treasures are eternal. So if you seek the world, right, you will only get of it what Allah decreed from you, and you will not have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will be distanced from Allah, right? But if you seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will have the best of this life, and in the grave, and on the Day of Judgment, and in paradise for eternity. And on top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make the dunya serve you. Right? As the hadith says, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed the dunya and said, Man khadamaki fastakhdumihi. Whoever serves you, then take service from them. وَمَنْ خَدَمَنَا فَخْدُمِهِ. And whoever serves us, then you serve them. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us and to make us of those who are His righteous servants, who give preference and priority to His obedience over all else and over everything else. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وسلم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. If there are any questions, we can take a couple before we close, inshaAllah ta'ala. And also, Ramadan is at our doorstep, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us to take great advantage of Ramadan, both in fulfilling the rights of the fast, not just abstaining from food and drink, but also abstaining from the sins and abstaining from the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our speech, in our actions, and in our hearts. And we also, and in the Taraweeh, in the standing in the prayer at night, and in reconnecting with the Quran. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who attain mercy in the first part of Ramadan, forgiveness in the middle part of Ramadan, and to be freed from the hellfire in the final part of Ramadan, as the Prophet ﷺ promised. Since there are no questions, inshallah, we will close here. Inshallah, the next term will start after Ramadan, and we wish everyone great well-being and closeness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and high faith and well-being in the interim time. And please keep us in your du'as as well. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.